What if the most chaotic weeks of the year aren't a glitch in the matrix, but the universe hitting a pause button on our entire reality? We just got through the first of 3 Mercury retrogrades due in 2026. And you know how it goes. Emails vanishing mid-send. I mean, the specific thread of a message you've spent 3 hours refining simply disappearing into the void. The heat rising in your cheeks as you stare at a blinking cursor on an empty screen. A tiny, pixelated metaphor for the chaos rolling through these weeks. It's not something we like to talk about, but let's be real. It feels like your agency is being stripped away, bit by bit, by a system you can't control. So when everything in the world feels stalled, let's consider that maybe the static is hiding something far more interesting, just waiting to be revealed. Today is the first of the episodes we'll do this year about Mercury, the metal, the quicksilver god, the first planet from the sun. Welcome to the Future Lore, where we explore mystery with curiosity and joy. Help me keep these lights on by supporting the show. Please gently touch those lovely links to like and subscribe or follow, rate, and review wherever you're listening. Now, Mercury is a metal in rebellion. Its electrons moving at half the speed of light just to stay fluid in a solid world. Today, we're tracing the quicksilver thread from the ancients escaping gravity to you escaping reality. Let's go. Mercury is the only metal on our planet that stays fluid at room temperatures. And for over 5,000 years, the ancients were so obsessed that they buried literal rivers of it flowing through their tombs and temples. From the Emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, to the hidden lakes below the Teotihuacan Temple of the Serpent, the lore says these leaders believed that quicksilver held secrets to immortality and flight. They knew something about this element that we've forgotten, and this is where the story splits into duality. But wait, let me pause here. Stop and actually imagine the smell of those rooms, a heavy, sweet, ozone-thick silence, and metallic taste like pennies on the back of your tongue. That's the sense of your nervous system starting to dissolve, one synapse at a time, because mercury is also a neurotoxin, so potent that a 60-pound spill at Hill Air Force Base in 2007 triggered a full-scale federal criminal investigation and multi-year remediation effort. This stuff is ruthless, poisoning your organs while causing a complete dissolution of sensory perception. We've banned it from modern medicine and stripped it from aerospace, precisely because it's so hard to handle without contamination. And this leaves us with an impossible paradox, where the same substance that the ancients venerated as a key to transcendence is deadly enough to warrant a federal lockdown. But the biggest question that pops up for every investigator is why something this dangerous keeps appearing in secret propulsion stories throughout history. You find it in ancient Sanskrit texts, and again in black budget programs. Always the same element, liquid metal, mercury. But maybe it takes something this volatile, this fast-moving, to actually work. So the Vedic texts are incredibly specific, and these are not dusty myths. These writings are like technical manuals for advanced hardware describing aircraft called vimanas that use a propulsion system so precise it sounds more like future technology. They detail something called a Mercury vortex engine, where liquid mercury is heated until it transforms. It's not burned like fuel, but spun into a driving whirlwind, a rotating force that generates a strange ball of light around the entire craft. The ancients called this substance Padma Rasam, or the liquid essence, and this is where the lore meets the math. So let's do a quick technical audit. If you're looking at the ancient diagrams, notice that the Padma Rasam isn't in a tank, it is in a torus, a literal donut of liquid fire spinning at the center of a ship. Which, if you're a plasma physicist hearing this, should raise an eyebrow, because the texts go on to describe an iron heating apparatus mounted beneath a mercury chamber to stimulate the liquid, which then just happens to generate magnetohydrodynamic plasma, the same physics that modern ion thrusters use today. And Mercury doesn't just sit there when it's heated, but instead it enters a unique state of matter that we're just rediscovering. The archaeological evidence for this is enough to make any modern scientist feel a little uncomfortable. While explorers did find these rivers of mercury inside tombs of ancient emperors and temples, it doesn't look like symbolic fantasies for the afterlife. These pools look more like functional components, like grounding wires or power cells, serving as the physical remnants of technology. This quicksilver thread of knowledge remains unbroken if you know where to look. Like the texts of the Vedas describing vortex engines, to the transition from mystery schools of ancient Sanskrit that lead directly to medieval alchemist labs, it's there. It even shows up in dark corners of history, but always with the same understanding of the same element using the same core principle. If you can spin Mercury fast enough and at the right frequency while understanding the exact geometry of rotation, you can achieve gravitational decoupling. In other words, you can make the weight of massive objects dissolve through pure resonance. So this story isn't about far-off aliens or mystical magic, or even the tombs of the powerful, but ancient humans discovering a substance on this planet that can do something nothing else can. We've spent thousands of years trying to remember this geometry of how mass and rotation converge. Thousands of years ago, they didn't have modern electromagnets or quantum computing, but they did catalyze direct observation into action. They watched the nature of Mercury and how mass aligns with spinning fields. And the data suggests the crafts they describe could actually fly. So if this technology was so effective, why isn't it in your garage right now? The answer isn't that we lost the knowledge. It's that we traded it in 1945. In the final days of World War II, something happened that changed the trajectory of human propulsion technology forever. Deep in the mountains of Lower Silesia, beneath the Wenceslas mine, Nazi scientists had been conducting experiments on something called Die Glocke, the bell. This wasn't just a weapon. It was the culmination of decades of research into mercury-based propulsion systems, and the classified records suggest they had actually gotten it to work. The bell was a structure approximately 12 to 15 feet in height and 9 feet in diameter, made from heavy metal and constructed like nothing the world had ever seen before. Inside, there were 2 counter-rotating cylinders spinning at extreme speed, filled with a substance codenamed Zerum 525. Polish journalist Igor Witowski, who interviewed SS officers after the war, determined that Zerum 525 was almost certainly irradiated mercury, or mercury that had been exposed to radioactive decay, supercharging its atomic structure and making it far more reactive than standard liquid quicksilver. The testing of Die Glocke didn't happen in conditions of modern hazardous materials. It happened deep in mines surrounded by workers, scientists, and prisoners. People. And the effects were catastrophic. They reported severe vertigo, hallucinations, nosebleeds that wouldn't stop. Plants in their lab allegedly disintegrated into pools of black liquid. Animals exposed suffered complete biological breakdown. Their blood separated into its constituent parts, and their organs simply ceased to function. But this project was considered to be far from a failure, because it proved the technology actually worked. So when the Allied forces closed in on Nazi positions, according to declassified accounts and whistleblower testimony, SS General Hans Kammler, who had overseen the entire Bell program, negotiated immunity for war crimes prosecution in exchange for handing over the complete technical specifications, working prototypes, and his expertise to the United States military. This was the moment when the most advanced mercury-based propulsion technology ever developed got absorbed into the American black budget. Operation Paperclip officially relocated German scientists to the United States after the war, dropping them into our space program and going on to develop the Saturn V rocket that eventually launched the Apollo astronauts to the moon. But the real treasure wasn't the scientists themselves, but their understanding of how to weaponize and stabilize Mercury plasma propulsion that became the foundation for every classified aerospace project that followed. Maybe the technology didn't vanish, but simply went underground, classified at levels so high that even sitting presidents didn't, and maybe still don't, have full access to the information. But why? To understand the physics without getting lost in the equations, you have to look at how Mercury reacts to electricity. When you pass a current through Mercury inside a magnetic field, the phenomenon called the Lorentz force activates and begins to rotate the liquid. This force doesn't just stir Mercury around, but spins it with such intensity that the basic rules of physics start to shift. Mercury has an extraordinary electrical conductivity, and when you combine that with its massive density, you get the perfect resonant medium. It isn't just a fluid anymore, it becomes a tuning fork at the atomic level. Now, back in 1964, modern science finally caught up to the ancient protocols when NASA conducted the CERT-1 ion thruster test and loaded the machine with 5.5 pounds of mercury. The results were absolutely remarkable. Mercury outperformed every other element they tried, including xenon, krypton, and argon. The reason for this is simple physics, because mercury was the densest fuel they could load into an ion engine. Now, let's look at the classified claims regarding the TR-3B craft, which uses a magnetic field disruptor consisting of a circular ring containing a mercury-based plasma that rotates at 60,000 rotations per minute. At those extreme speeds, the mercury enters a state where its effective gravitational weight falls by nearly 9/10. You aren't fighting against the laws of gravity at that point. You are successfully negotiating with them in a physical shift in the field. If you can solve the engineering puzzle and contain the reaction, mercury becomes the only substance on Earth that can manipulate mass in this way without conventional propulsion. But why would NASA walk away if it outperformed everything else? Not just because it was unsafe. They knew about toxicity, and not just because it was too difficult to manage. They had the engineering expertise. They abandoned it because what they realized was what the Nazis had already proven. Mercury in a controlled vortex doesn't just move a craft through space. It fundamentally alters the gravitational field around it. It generates a mass nullification at the quantum substrate. And, the more you look at what's becoming mainstream news, it wouldn't surprise me at all to know that once they proved you could decouple from Earth's gravity using torsion, they classified it and let the world keep building rockets, thinking that's the only way to achieve release. Now, we move to where the ancient lore, the black budget propulsion, and modern planetary science converge. You've been told that Mercury Retrograde is a quirky meme, a few weeks of communication breakdown and vanishing emails. But that's just the surface. What's actually happening could be a physical shift in the electromagnetic topology of our entire solar system. Think of the planet Mercury not as a rock, but as a giant iron-rich cannonball. Its core makes up 80% of its volume, and its magnetic field is profoundly asymmetrical, shifted northward by 20% of the planet's radius. This makes Mercury less like a planet and more like a cosmic resonance tuner. When it laps the Earth in its orbit, that asymmetrical mass creates what physicists call a torsion field. To understand why that matters, we have to look at the master key hidden in the element itself. Mercury is what we call a relativistic metal, and the reason it refuses to be solid at room temperature comes down to the speed of light. The inner shell electrons in a mercury atom, specifically the 6s electrons, are moving incredibly fast, about half the speed of light. Now imagine you're trying to hold on to a spinning rope. The faster it spins, the harder it is to grip. These electrons are moving so fast that they literally slip through the normal bonding framework of matter. They're in a constant state of rebellion against the laws of physics, fighting their own atomic structure to remain fluid. This is why the ancients called it quicksilver and associated it with transcendence. It's a substance that exists halfway between the material and the light. And this is where Einstein-Cartan theory changes everything. Standard relativity says gravity is just the bending of space, but Einstein-Cartan adds the missing piece, torsion. It says that spinning objects don't just bend space-time, they twist it. So, the planet Mercury and the element Mercury are resonant expressions of the same torsional principle operating at different scales. When that planetary scale mass spins, it creates a vector boundary where electromagnetic forces begin to cancel each other out through resonance. Down here on Earth, we don't experience that as dry data. We feel it as the decoupling of tech glitches, time blindness, and communication breakdown, because our local space-time is literally being twisted. But you aren't just the observer, you're a sensor, alive to the movement of this energy. And researchers at Tohoku University proved that mercury flow of just 2.7 meters per second generates a measurable voltage through something called the inverse spin Hall effect. Now scale that up to a planetary body that is mostly iron core spinning in a resonant orbit. That creates space-time scale voltage fluctuation that's rippling through every conductive medium, including your own body. So pause right now. Feel that pulse in your wrist. That isn't just blood. It's a saline solution carrying iron and copper through a magnetic field in a careful electrolyte balance. When the solar system retunes its torsion field, your nervous system, your own electrical grid, is trying to process this high-speed data coming in at a new angle. That sense of being untethered during a retrograde, maybe it isn't in your head. It could be a physical response to a shift in the field. This is what the ancients knew. They didn't need the equations for Weissenhoff fluid effect to know that spinning matter with intrinsic angular momentum could reduce the gravitational constant. They didn't have ion thrusters or magnetohydrodynamic plasma. They had direct observation that if you could align your own resonant torsion with the torsion of the field, you could make the heavy become light. We didn't lose the technology. We just lost the manual on how to tune the instruments. So let's talk about what this means for you right now. Recognize that physical reality is a field of flowing energy instead of a solid obstacle course that demands you beat it into submission every single day. You are essentially a biological version of a Mercury vortex engine. Your blood is literally magnetic. The neurons of your entire nervous system, from the highest executive functions to your most primal physical baseline, fire in specific patterns that generate these same fields. And if you're a fan of this show, you won't be surprised to hear that your beautiful, resonant, aligned human heart produces the strongest electrical signal in your entire body, resonating outward in a measurable field in the shape of, you guessed it, a torus. You are a localized expression of a torsional warp in the fabric of space-time. But instead of getting a big head about how powerful you are, maybe get a big heart about it, because that's where the action is. So, let's bring this back to Mercury Retrograde, the chaos, the resistance. Let's be real. The old meaning structure that feels like it's collapsing right now is what we call rational agency. It's the belief we've all been raised in, that you can force every outcome because the world is a solid machine. We've all tried to white-knuckle our way through a week where everything is breaking down. That exhausted, hollow feeling, when you realize no matter how hard you work, the structure of your willpower has reached its stress limit. So, let's name it, and accept the disappointment that can come with letting go of the idea that if we only push hard enough, are clever enough, we'll be in control. It's painful, right? It is for me to give up clinging to an idea that I can think my way out of overthinking, or that if I only worked harder, I would earn the right to rest. But what if instead of feeling anxious about being stuck and fighting against a lack of progress, we could try to lean into the slower resonance of the retrograde? Maybe that could bring with it a strange sense of freedom, when the normal rules feel like they've loosened up. Your intuition could be sensing the fluid nature of reality that's waiting for you to make something heavy become light. Not through force, but through alignment with the field. And let's check our calibration before the next acceleration. Carl Sagan famously said, "We are made of star stuff." Literally the exact same elements from the periodic table to the spinning electromagnetic fields in space. You are the system experiencing itself. So today, drop your weirdest glitch story from the retrograde in the comments, especially the ones where you feel like the rules of reality started to let go. Let's map this together, because the more of us who share, the easier it is to ride the wave instead of drowning in it. Remember, you are far more powerful, far more strange, and far more connected than you've ever been told. Please support the channel. Drop us a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell on YouTube. Follow, rate, and review on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen. Want even more? Visit thefuturelore.com to join our free community and find all of our official links, which are at @thefuturelore with no spaces everywhere. Until next time, my loves, I am so lucky to be here with you to embrace the mysterious and stay curious.
In the future lore we stand so bright. Mystery calls in the dark of night. Curiosity dances in our eyes. Joyful beacons under endless skies. Ancient wisdom.